So what did Intercept DC Bureau Chief and great friend of the show, Ryan Grim, think about last night's debate? Well, he is here now to tell us. Great to see you, Ryan.
Good to see you guys. I'm good.
What's going on?
All right, what'd you think overall?
Last one was better.
Yeah, it was a lot better. Like such an understatement. It was terrible last night.
Come on, get a hold of yourselves. And also, and so the question of who's in the audience is fascinating because a lot of these debates and party events are stacked with donors. Like this is, and actually this is the kind of soft corruption that if you have to accept some kind of corruption is okay in this sense. Like if somebody's going to give money to the Democratic Party, you'd rather that what they get out of that is a picture with some bozo or a seat at an event rather than a loophole that allows them to fire all the workers, steal their pensions. Like if those are our two choices. Now, we're trying to move to a world where there are other choices, but let's pretend.
Okay, fair.
In the past, that was always okay to have them sitting there because they liked all the candidates on stage, and so each one would get a little.
Well, they
golf
probably
clap.
donated to each one.
They donated to all of them. They have a favorite probably, but like they're fine with all of them. That's not the case anymore. They're not fine with all of them anymore. And so you can't have these donors in these events anymore because they're not going to behave themselves like they used to. And so you saw this booing and this hooting and hollering. And it was kind of like a primal scream of the dying establishment.
It's so well said.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. One thing we wanted to get your take on, Ryan, in particular, is when Bernie Sanders talked a little bit about Israel and his decision not to appear at the AIPAC conference. Let's take a listen to that.
If elected, Senator Sanders, you would be America's first Jewish president. You recently called a very prominent, well-known American Israel lobby a platform for, quote, bigotry. What would you say to American Jews who might be concerned you're not, from their perspective, supportive enough of Israel? And specifically, sir, would you move the U.S. Embassy back to Tel Aviv?
Let me the answer is it's something that we would take into consideration.
Which would
But here, excuse me. But here is the point. I am very proud of being Jewish. I actually lived in Israel for some months. But what I happen to believe is that right now, sadly, tragically, in Israel, through Bibi Netanyahu, you have a reactionary racist who is now running that country. And I happen to believe that what our foreign policy in the Mideast should be about is absolutely protecting the independence and security of Israel. But you cannot ignore the suffering of the Palestinian people. We have got to have a policy that reaches out to the Palestinians and the Americans. And in answer to your question, that will come within the context of bringing nations together in the Mideast.
What did you make of that, Ryan?
Well, one thing that was unsaid in that question, and which adds important context to this question, at least immediate context, is that AIPAC was helping to fund the super PAC that ran, and we broke this at the Intercept.
That's right. And we covered it here, the Democratic Majority for Israel PAC.
So they were sending donors to this PAC and allowing contributions to this super PAC to count as donations to AIPAC. And so they ran ads in Iowa and New Hampshire attacking Bernie Sanders and didn't attack him over Israel, attacked him over his heart attack and being a socialist. So, AIPAC and Bernie Sanders are clearly at war. But what this does is it shows that the AIPAC is no longer this bipartisan organization. In response to Warren and Sanders saying that they're not going to AIPAC and to this push to get people not to go to the conference this weekend, AIPAC has tried to rally a lot of Democrats to say that they support AIPAC. They haven't been able to get many to do it. One of them...
Steny Hoyer went last year, if I recall.
Well, Steny Hoyer's huge friend of AIPAC, and always will be. Elaine Luria, who Steny Hoyer recruited to run for Congress in Virginia, and she took the AIPAC bait. She went on Twitter. She said, I protect AIPAC. This is terrible what Bernie Sanders said about this great organization. And then several Virginia delegates jumped on her. And it created this tension within the Virginia Democratic Party that never would have, and Lee Carter was one of them, actually, who we had on the show the other day. You would never have seen that a few years ago. It used to be the most safe thing you could say in politics was, I support AIPAC.
Well, I mean, that was the thing that kind of blew me away in that moment was, look, we already talked about the audience was no friend of Bernie Sanders last night. This is one of the few things that they cheered. They were on his side on this thing. And he went hard. He said Bibi's policies were racist and, was unapologetic about not going and speaking at AIPAC. I mean, I think it's hard to process what a dramatic shift this is in Democratic politics, where it used to be completely lockstep bipartisan
I'd say American
support.
Politics writ large.
Completely.
Yeah,
And so, I mean, that really floored me. And on the other hand, it was actually Michael Bloomberg who then got the next question on it, who is an AIPAC candidate.
He's going to AIPAC.
And he was the one who actually felt the need to sort of try to moderate his views to fit the, the views of the audience, the views of the Democratic Party.
Right. The fact that Michael Bloomberg feels like he has to at least acknowledge the humanity of Palestinian people is a sea change. And what Sanders has effectively done is separated the Israeli government from the Israeli state, from the idea
from the people.
Right.
I am curious about
Yeah.
this, though. I mean, he called. This is at the risk of sounding too much like cable, but he comes out. I mean, he calls Bibi a reactionary racist. Why is his most barbed rhetoric reserved for Bibi Netanyahu and not like a Fidel Castro? Look, I mean, he condemns authoritarianism. Fine, I accept that. I think I also agree that you can holistically look at a regime and you can separate out what's good and what's bad. But he does seem to have the harshest rhetoric for Netanyahu in particular. Do you think it's because of his personal connection to Israel? I mean, it just seems strange, and a lot of Jews that I know are, they're troubled by it.
I think it's a number of things. So it's the fact that he's still in office, he's still a leading figure in Israel, and also the connection to it. Like and a lot of American Jews and leftists had a dream for Israel, that it would be a social democracy that respected human rights, and they're seeing that dream be destroyed by people like Bibi Netanyahu. So he sees him as a political opponent and an ongoing one, whereas Fidel Castro's dead.
Sure.
And Vladimir Putin's still alive. Still alive.
MBS.
MBS. He condemns them in pretty harsh.
He does.
In pretty harsh terms. But I think, the same way that the left condemns Democrats, centrist Democrats, in kind of harsher terms than they do the Tea Party. They don't expect anything from the Tea Party.
Sure.
Right.
And Bernie Sanders expects more from Netanyahu and from the Israeli government in the way that they respect human rights.
I think that's well said.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about was Pete's performance last night. I mean, look, it's the end of the road for him. Right. Yeah. He was lucky there were two white states that went first. He was able to do relatively well in, not so great in Nevada. It's fully expected he's going to do very poorly in South Carolina, and that his fundamental weakness with black voters is going to be exposed. So he was throwing everything he could, talking over everybody, trying to get in on every answer. I mean, it was just completely over the top. Chris Cillizza did say he thought he
won the debate.
So let's just put that out
So he lost badly.
What did you think of his performance? What was noteworthy to you?
Well, first of all, this claim that he made that he has 2,000 donors in Charleston appears to be completely fabricated.
Shocked.
FEC doesn't show anywhere near that, 100 or so, unless he got some absolute flood of donations in the last few weeks that haven't been
skeptical on that.
Been reported yet.
Yeah.
Going out and saying that you don't have to choose between the nostalgia of the 50s and the revolutionary politics of the 60s. Telling that to an audience, a significant number of who actually participated in those revolutionary politics of the 1960s, which ended segregation in South Carolina. South Carolina, in many ways, is a cradle of the civil rights movement.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
You're going to go to Charleston and mock the revolutionary politics of the 1960s.
Yes.
And then he has since he thought it was such a great line, he put it on Twitter, but then later he deleted it. That happened in the 60s too?
Oh yeah.
I just meant the weathermen.
Yeah. Let me ask you about this, Ryan. You've thought a lot about who endorses whom. After Buttigieg has savaged Sanders so much, does he endorse him before he becomes the Democratic nominee? If he becomes the Democratic nominee.
I could see it just out of pure cynicism.
Right.
Yeah.
If
anybody could do it, it would be him. I'm just saying, could he? Would he actually do that?
He'll dust off that old Bernie pro-Bernie essay.
Yes. I've been a hipster on Bernie. What's the most cynical thing he could possibly do that would further his political ambitions? And that would be to embrace Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, right.
Because what's the downside for him? If Bernie Sanders loses the nomination or loses the general, the establishment will forgive people who got on board with it. If Bernie Sanders wins, then Pete Buttigieg kind of rides the coattails, and 4 years from now, 8 years from now, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28. This guy's going to be with us the rest of our lives, running for president.
Please.
So he's going to be reminding us for the next 50 years that he endorsed Bernie Sanders at some point.
On the other hand, he could very much go the corporate route. He's got a lot of, wealthy connections that I'm sure be happy to hire him in to do, comms, whatever. But if you're going that direction, it is not an asset to have backed Bernie at any stage in the process. So
they would respect the cynicism of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are going to half-heartedly endorse him. They're going to make statements saying that they support the goals of a better world.
Yeah, and asked to be on this or that board or whatever.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
We will see.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Next to weigh in on how she thinks Pete Buttigieg did, what's next for her candidate, Buttigieg surrogate Jennifer Holdsworth. That's next.